Assalamu alaikum. Hope everyone's having a wonderful evening today. Thank you for joining us today to learn about your rights as immigrants in New York City. I also want to give a big thank you to MCNY for hosting this wonderful immigrants workshop. Before we start, I would like to make it clear that I'm not a lawyer, and this presentation is an education guide to help you learn about your rights as immigrant New Yorkers and services that are available to you. It is not meant to serve legal advice. Sister, can you pull up the slideshow, please? As I mentioned before, this presentation is an education guide to help you learn about immigrant enforcement actions and how they affect immigrant New Yorkers. It is not intended to serve as legal advice. If I'm talking too fast, please let us know and I will slow down. Next slide, please. A little bit about CAIR-NY York. We are a Muslim civil rights organization offering both direct legal services and grassroots advocacy pertaining to discrimination, hate crimes, and Islamophobia. We also do mobilizations like rallies and protests, civic engagement like GOTV efforts, and work with media to challenge stereotypical narratives of Muslims and Islam. We invite them to learn more about our organization, including opportunities for internships and fellowships at the college and graduate level, and volunteer opportunities starting at the high school level. And you can learn more by checking us out at www.cair-NY-York.org. Next slide, please. Today, we will learn about our rights as immigrants in New York City. We will also cover updates on policy changes such as DACA, temporary protected status, the travel ban, and public charge. Please make sure to take the information sheets on those issues. For more details, if you would like, you could send an email to us or to MCNY, who will direct you to us. And we have them available in many languages. Our objectives or goals for today are first, to learn about recent changes to federal immigration policies that may affect you. Second, to learn how to identify and interact with federal immigration officers in public and private spaces. Third, to learn how to access free and safe legal services and resources. And lastly, to learn about COVID-19 treatment and testing. Next slide, please. First, we will be learning about immigration enforcement actions and how we can be prepared. Immigration enforcement actions are when ICE enforces immigration laws, such as conducting investigations and/or making arrests. Regardless of your immigration status, it is important to know your rights when interacting with ICE in order to keep yourself and your community safe. Next slide, please. There are some terms that are important for us to know, since they will come up a lot in the presentation and will be useful when dealing with these issues. We are going to go through each of them and each of these terms to learn what they mean. Again, if I'm speaking too fast, please let us know in the comments on this live. Our first term is Department of Homeland Security, or DHS. DHS is the federal agency that oversees immigration matters and United States citizenship and immigration services. Next, we have ICE. ICE stands for agency within DHS that enforces immigration laws. A lawful permanent resident, or LPR, is a person that has been officially granted the right to reside permanently in the U.S., which includes permission to work in the U.S. LPRs are sometimes referred to as green card holders. An undocumented person is someone without legal immigration status living in the U.S., including people who overstay after entering on a visa. Our next term is public areas. A public area is a space where anyone can go. Examples of this would be a retail store or a supermarket, or any street or sidewalk. There are private areas. A private area is a space that is not generally accessible by members of the public, such as your home or employee-only areas at a workplace. Lastly, we have warrants. A warrant is an official document that gives government agents certain permissions. We will discuss the different types of warrants and their uses later in the presentation. Next slide, please. In the last 3+ years, there have been a lot of changes to federal immigration policies. They can happen quickly and be confusing. we're going to go over the most up-to-date information on some of the major policy changes. First is DACA, or Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. DACA is a federal immigration program that began in 2012 under President Obama that helps undocumented immigrants who came to the United States as young people. DACA provides eligible undocumented immigrants with temporary protection from deportation and access to work authorization. Currently, the federal government must continue to accept renewal DACA applications only, not accepting new applications. For more details, please see our available one-pager. Since taking office, President Biden has issued a memorandum encouraging the Attorney General and Secretary of Homeland Security to do everything in their power to preserve and fortify the DACA program. If you have any questions about how this may affect you, please call the Action NYC Hotline at 1-800-354-0365. The next big policy change we will talk about is the travel ban. The travel ban puts varying travel and immigration restrictions on certain people from 13 designated countries by barring visa issuance and/or entry into the United States. There are some exceptions. The countries currently affected by the ban are Iran, Libya, North Korea, Syria, Venezuela, Yemen, Somalia, Nigeria, Eritrea, Kyrgyzstan, and Myanmar, known as Burma now, as well as Tanzania and Sudan. Since taking office, President Biden repealed the travel bans that restricted entry into the U.S. for people primarily from the Muslim and African countries of Eritrea, Iran, Kyrgyzstan, Libya, Myanmar, Nigeria, North Korea, Somalia, Sudan, Syria, Tanzania, Venezuela, and Yemen. This is effective January 20th, 2021, and means all embassies and consulates must allow people who were previously banned from obtaining visas to apply for and go through the process, and enable those who were denied a visa an opportunity to reapply or reopen their case. To understand how this may impact you, please call the Action NYC Hotline at 1-800-354-0365. The third major policy change we are covering is Temporary Protected Status. Temporary Protected Status, or TPS, allows individuals from certain countries to remain in the United States if it is unsafe for them to return to their country home due to a humanitarian emergency there. For example, the federal government may designate a country for TPS if there is an armed conflict, such as a civil war or a natural disaster, for example, an earthquake. TPS enables recipients to work in the U.S. lawfully and protects them from deportation as long as the TPS designation is in effect. The following countries are currently designated for TPS: El Salvador, Haiti, Honduras, Nepal, Nicaragua, Somalia, Sudan, South Sudan, Syria, and Yemen. The future of TPS for many of these countries is not certain. People should make sure to get the most up-to-date information about TPS designations. The fourth federal policy is public charge. The Trump administration has announced a rule change that may impact when a non-citizen is considered a public charge for immigration purposes. The rule makes it harder for some people to get green cards or visas because some immigrants must show they will not be a public charge in their immigration application. This test only applies in certain situations, including when someone is applying for a green card or if they have changing/extending certain visas. And it only applies to some categories of people applying for green cards or visas. When the test applies, federal immigration law allows immigration officials to deny green cards and visas if they find that an application is likely to become a public charge. It is important to know this rule came into effect on February 24th, 2020. This rule does not change eligibility requirements for public benefit programs. Getting care, treatment, or testing for COVID-19 will not make you a public charge or hurt your ability to apply for a green card. Getting charity or discounted medical care will not hurt your ability to apply for a green card. There is no public charge test when green card holders apply for citizenship. Please seek out care without fear. Immigrant New Yorkers who are concerned about changes to the public charge rule could impact them or their loved ones can get help by making the best decisions for themselves and their family, and you can get informed by speaking to a lawyer. You can also call the Action NYC hotline, as mentioned before, at 1-800-354-0365 354-0365 and say public charge. Again, if you or someone you might know might need legal assistance related to TPS, travel ban, DACA, or public charge, call 311 and say Action NYC for free and safe immigration legal help. Next slide, please. A very important thing to know if you interact with ICE is that they are not local police officers from NYPD. This is important to know because the NYPD does not conduct civil immigration enforcement. You can report a crime to the NYPD and they should not ask about your immigration status. You should also know that the New York State Police do not conduct civil immigration enforcement and should not ask about your immigration status. Sometimes ICE will wear uniforms that say police on them, and this can be confusing. Some ways you can tell the difference between ICE and NYPD is that they have different uniforms. NYPD uniforms will usually have a patch on their arm that says City of New York on it. ICE uniforms can have words on them such as federal agent, police, police ICE, HSI, which would stand for Homeland Security Investigation, or ICE HSI. You can see some of the differences in this picture. Next slide, please. Some of the other ways you can tell the difference is by their badges. Their badges are different. NYPD badges will say City of New York. ICE badges will typically say ICE or Special Agent or U.S. Department of Homeland Security. Next slide, please. Some of the places where people may interact with ICE agents are at work, in public spaces, or their home. It is important to know your rights in each of these areas. Your home or any home is a private space. Your place of work can have both public and private spaces. The streets, parks, and courthouses are considered public spaces. Next slide, please. Based on a New York State courthouse rule as of April 17, 2019, law enforcement officials, including ICE agents, can no longer make arrests inside New York State courthouses without a judicial warrant or judicial order that authorizes the arrest and is signed by a judge. I will explain what these documents are shortly. On July 22, 2020, the New York State Senate passed the Protect Our Courts Act, POCA. The Protect Our Courts Act prohibits ICE and other law enforcement agencies from making civil arrests in and around New York State courthouses unless they have a judicial warrant or judicial order that authorizes the arrest and is signed by a judge. Again, I will explain what these documents are shortly. Next slide, please. There are certain types of locations where ICE typically does not conduct immigration enforcement. These are called sensitive locations. Examples of a sensitive location include schools, hospitals, religious institutions, and public ceremonies such as weddings, public demonstrations, or funerals. It is important to know that this is an ICE policy and can change at any time. Next slide, please. ICE has a number of investigative tools and databases that are used to identify individuals who may be removable. They may know about people through a number of ways. People who have submitted an immigration application or otherwise have had interactions with the immigration system, including at the border. Those who have been arrested and fingerprinted for a crime, even for a minor crime, and even for arrests that did not lead to a conviction or from long ago. ICE has broadened the scope of its enforcement in the last couple of years. Nevertheless, the following groups of people are still a focus for arrest and removal. Those with pending criminal cases or prior convictions, those with an order of removal from immigration court or who have previously been removed, those who commit fraud or misrepresentation in immigration applications, and those they believe pose a threat to public safety or national security. Next slide, please. If ICE comes to your workplace or home, they may have a warrant. A warrant is a document issued by a government official that gives law enforcement permission to do certain things. There are different types of warrants, and each one gives ICE permission to do something specific. It is important to know what each warrant does and looks like. First, we have the administrative warrant. If you cannot see all the details on the screen, you can have a copy. Please let us know, either MCNY or CAIR, and we will send it to you. An administrative warrant or ICE warrant is addressed to federal immigration officers by their superior at DHS and is used in civil immigration enforcement actions. It is signed by an ICE officer and not a judge. You can typically find the signature at the bottom. An administrative warrant does not give ICE the authority to demand entry to the private areas of a workplace or a home. Next slide, please. The other type of warrant is a judicial warrant. A judicial warrant is signed by a state or federal judge. A judicial warrant can give ICE permission to enter private areas that we spoke about earlier, such as a home. If the ICE agent does not have a judicial warrant, they need permission expressed vocally or by action of a resident to enter a home. If the ICE agent does not have a judicial warrant, they need the express permission of the owner, manager, or supervisor to enter the private space of a workplace. Judges have different ways of writing warrants, so they can look different depending on who wrote it. Some things you will always find are the name and signature of the judge, the name of the property they have permission to search, the date and time of the search, and the location of the court. Next slide, please. President Biden signed an executive order in his first week in office that stopped most but not all deportations from being carried out. This order went into effect on January 22nd and was supposed to be in effect for 100 days. However, a lawsuit filed by the Texas Attorney General's office was successful in temporarily stopping the moratorium from going into effect for a few weeks. A hearing was held on the 19th of February to decide if the temporary stopping of the moratorium will be extended. On this slide, we're going to go through some important things to know whenever you are interacting with ICE. If you are approached by federal immigration enforcement agents such as ICE, be aware that you have rights regardless of your immigration status. Whenever you interact with ICE, it is important to remember to stay calm. You have the right to remain silent. If you speak to ICE, anything you say can be used against you. You can record the situation with your phone if you feel comfortable, and so long as you do not interfere with officers. Agents may say you cannot record, but that is not true. However, if agents are trying to talk to you or arrest you, starting or continuing to film may put you at risk. People can also report the ICE activity here on to the numbers that are on the slide. The Legal Aid Immigration Hotline at 1-844-955-3425, or the Immigration Defense Project Hotline at 1-212-725-6422. Next slide, please. If ICE is at your door, you do not have to immediately open the door for ICE, and you do not have to speak to ICE. You have the right to remain silent. If you speak to ICE, anything you say can be used against you. You can say, "I do not want to talk to you right now." From behind the closed door, you may ask them who they are and to show their badge, ID, or business card through the window or peephole, or to pass it under the closed door. You can ask ICE if they have a judicial warrant and want to see the warrant through the window or peephole, or to pass it under the door. If ICE agents do not have a judicial warrant signed by a judge, they cannot enter your home without permission from an adult, except in emergency situations. If they do not have a judicial warrant, you may state that you do not consent to entry or search, but this does not mean you're allowed to physically resist a search. If ICE is inside your home without your permission, you can tell them clearly, "I do not consent to you being in my home. Please leave." Saying this may not always stop them, but it may help any future legal case. If ICE starts to search rooms or items in your home, you can tell them, "I do not consent to your search." You may continue to repeat this if they continue to search without consent. You can tell them if there are children or other vulnerable residents in your home. Next slide, please. ICE can enter the public space of any workplace without the need of any type of warrant. Public spaces may include office lobbies, supermarkets, retail stores, or a dining area of a restaurant. ICE cannot legally enter the private space of a workplace unless they have the permission of your employer or a judicial warrant signed by a judge. Private spaces are employee-only areas that may include the break room or storage room of a workplace. If approached by ICE at work, you do not have to answer their questions and can direct them to your employer. Your employers can ask ICE to show their identification and ask if ICE has a judicial warrant. As always, if an ICE agent tries to search your pockets or belongings, you can say, "I do not consent to a search." If they search you anyway, you cannot physically stop them, but clearly saying you do not consent may be important in any future legal cases. Next slide, please. If an ICE agent arrests someone in public, it typically happens quickly. They might call your name out loud and ask you to confirm your name and then detain you. On the street or in public, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say to ICE can be used against you. Before responding with your name or anything else, you may ask, "Am I free to go?" If yes, then you can say, "I do not want to answer your questions," and walk away. If not, you can say, "I want to use my right not to answer questions," and you can say, "I want to speak to a lawyer." If an ICE officer tries to search your pockets or belongings, you can say, "I do not consent to a search," but you may not physically resist a search. Next slide, please. If you are arrested by ICE, these are some things you should know. The agents may not be able to communicate with you in your language. If you speak to ICE, anything you say to ICE can be used against you. You may choose to remain silent. You may state that you wish to speak to an attorney before saying anything or signing anything. You can tell them if you have a medical issue or need to arrange for childcare. You should not lie or give false documents. You should not physically resist. If you are being detained, people in the community may film ICE, so long as they do not interfere with officers. If ICE agents are trying to talk or arrest you, starting or continuing to film may put you at risk. If someone you know is being detained by ICE, but you may ask where they are being taken. Next slide, please. The detention process can be confusing and immigration authorities may not walk you through everything, so it is important to know the information here. Again, the agents might not be able to communicate with you in your language. You have the right to an attorney and may ask to speak with your lawyer or take time to obtain an attorney. If you are detained, you have the right to call an attorney or your family. You have the right to be visited by an attorney in detention. You do not have to sign anything. You may ask to speak to your lawyer before signing anything. You have the right to contact your consulate. Write down the name and telephone number of the deportation officer assigned to your case. Next slide, please. If your loved one has been detained by ICE and you don't know where they're being taken, you can find them by using the ICE locator, locator.ice.gov. To use the locator, you need your loved one's country of birth and a number, or country of birth, first name, last name. The name must be spelled correctly, and date of birth. It is safe to use the locator. Each ICE facility has its own rules about visitation and sending money. You can look up visitation and other information here at ice.gov/detention-facilities and call the jail to confirm that the information is still correct. Generally, people who are undocumented can visit their loved ones and their immigration status should not be flagged. However, it is important to review each jail's requirements for identification and whether background checks are required. If you are worried about the risks of visiting a loved one, you should speak to an attorney. To find out when and where your loved one's next hearing will take place, you can call the EOIR hotline at 1-800-898-7180 and inputting your loved one's A number. If they do appear in the system but do not have a court date, press 3 to check for old decisions. If it says that a court ordered removal, it means that your loved one will not get a new hearing, and it is extremely important for them to get legal help immediately as they will be on the fast track to deportation. Next slide, please. Some ways to prepare for immigration enforcement besides practicing are Know Your Rights, this presentation, and other similar presentations that can help equip you for interacting with federal immigration officers. You can create an emergency plan for you and your family in case you are detained or deported. You choose an emergency contact and memorize their phone number. This should be someone you trust, including someone like your lawyer. Choose a standby guardian for your children. A standby guardian is a person you choose who will take care of your children. A standby guardian is a person you do not have to that will take care of your children when you cannot for up to 1 year. Making sure your standby guardian does not mean you are giving up your legal rights as a parent. It only means you are giving the guardian permission to make certain decisions for your children when you cannot. To learn more about standby guardians, you can call the Action NYC Hotline. The number will be in the next NYC slide. Next slide, please. Another way you can prepare is by getting a legal checkup to see if you are eligible for an immigration benefit and learn more about your immigration options. Even if you have consulted with an immigration lawyer in the past, you may want to do so again in case some things have changed. Getting an immigration legal checkup if you have concerns about your immigration status, would like to learn more about your eligibility for an immigration benefit like a green card or citizenship, if you need help with an immigration application, or if you would like to consult with a safe, free immigration legal service provider. If you would like to learn more about your rights as an immigrant New Yorker or make a complaint against your employer, you can call 311. Next slide, please. MOIA provides legal service support through the Constituent Service Line and Action NYC. Action NYC will connect you to a free and safe immigration legal help in your New York City community and in your language. Action NYC provides free, comprehensive, and confidential legal screenings to determine eligibility for immigration benefits. Free, safe immigration legal help for a range of immigration benefits, including citizenship, green card applications and renewals, deferred action for childhood arrivals, DACA, or temporary protected status, TPS, and many more. Action NYC is located in neighborhoods, schools, and hospitals throughout the 5 boroughs. You can make an appointment by calling 1-800-354-0365 or by calling 311 and saying Action NYC. Next slide, please. Action NYC, the hotline is a toll-free live hotline that can connect you to immigration legal help and answer your immigration and naturalization questions. The hotline provides assistance in more than 200 languages. Through the hotline, you can ask general immigration and naturalization questions, receive an immigration legal appointment, obtain referrals to immigrant-related programs. You can call 1-800-354-0365 between 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday, or call 311 and say Action NYC to connect with a live operator, and all calls are confidential. Next slide, please. As mentioned, non-lawyers can only translate, photocopy, notarize, take your photo, and help you get documents and medical tests. To report immigration fraud, you can call the new American Hotline at 1-800-566-7636. Next slide, please. COVID-19 testing. All New Yorkers should get a COVID-19 test, whether or not they have symptoms or at increased risk. If you have already been tested and were negative, you should still get another test if you have COVID-19 symptoms or are concerned by possible exposure. This Test and Trace Corps is an initiative to stop COVID-19 infections in New York City and help the city open back up. If you test positive, you will receive a call from a tracer who will ask if you need more medical attention, help you arrange isolate at your home or at a free hotel, and create a list of everyone you had contact with since shortly before the onset of symptoms. If you test positive, a tracer will also facilitate healthcare as well as mental health services and get meal and medication delivery. Free testing, regardless of immigration status or whether you have insurance, is available at the following locations. NYC Health and Hospitals operates multiple COVID-19 testing sites throughout the 5 boroughs. The location information can be found on the NYC Health Hospital's website. CityMD, through partnership with the New York City government, offers testing at all of its New York City sites on a walk-in basis 7 days per week. Visit CityMD for locations and hours through the 5 boroughs. Advantage Care Physicians has partnered with the New York State government to offer testing at 22 sites in New York City. You can visit ACPNY's website for more information. There are hundreds of convenient testing sites across the city, as well as mobile testing units visiting different locations throughout the 5 boroughs. For more information, you can visit nyc.gov/COVID test. Rapid COVID-19 testings are also available. You can now make an appointment for a free rapid COVID-19 virus test at multiple COVID Express testing sites throughout the city. Test results will be available within 24 hours or less of your visit. COVID-19 tests performed at COVID Express testing sites will be free to all New Yorkers, regardless of immigration status. Testing will be available by appointment only. The fastest way to make an appointment is to choose a time through the DOH-MH online scheduler. For more information, visit COVID-19 rapid testing website of the DOH-MH website. Next slide, please. As important as it is to be able to access coronavirus testing, it is critical that you can access healthcare services if you do get sick with COVID-19. First, if you have health insurance, it is important to remember that all health insurance plans must cover COVID-19 testing without any out-of-pocket payments. Second, New York State Emergency Medicaid covers COVID-19 testing and treatment without any out-of-pocket payments for low-income, uninsured residents, including undocumented immigrants. If you want to sign up for an emergency Medicaid in advance, contact NYC Department of Health Insurance enrollers by visiting DOH-MH website. You can also call 311 and say, "Get covered." Third, if you have disputes with hospitals or doctors about the medical bills or disagree with the health insurance plans about eligibility or coverage, or just have questions about navigating the healthcare and health insurance system, you can call Community Health Advocates, CHA, at their hotline at 1-888-614-5400, Monday through Friday from 9 to 4 p.m. CHA has a language line that can provide translation services in more than 170 languages. Next slide, please. Before we head on to the review, I will give you a little bit of information on the COVID-19 vaccine. There are now 2 vaccines approved for use, Pfizer and Moderna. Both vaccines are safe and more than 94% effective. You cannot get COVID from the vaccine. If you are concerned about getting the vaccine, you should speak to your doctor. The vaccine is free to all New Yorkers regardless of immigration status. You do not need to share your immigration status. Your privacy will be protected. New York State is expanding COVID-19 vaccine eligibility in phases to make sure the most vulnerable people in the community get the vaccine first. We are currently in phase 1B expansion number 2, but most New Yorkers will likely to be able to get the vaccine by mid-2021. To be eligible, you must also live or work in the New York State. Proof of resident or employment is currently required. A letter from your employer, a driver's license, an ID NYC are all acceptable. For a full list of accepted proof of identification, you can visit the COVID-19 vaccine.health.ny.gov. So to review, if ICE agents do not have permission to enter a private space, the kind of warrant they would need is a judicial warrant signed by a judge. You have the right to ask your lawyer. You have the right to speak to your lawyer before talking to or signing documents for ICE, and you can call 311 for details on any city services. Next slide, please. As this is a live event, if you have questions, you may write them in the comment section and they will be forwarded, or you can email CAIR-New York or MCNY, who will forward you to us so we can help. Next slide, please. Protection from discrimination in a workplace. All employers in New York City with 4 or more employees must comply with the New York City human rights law regardless of whether their employees are full-time or part-time, permanent or temporary, paid on the books or off the books, or are paid or unpaid interns. Some provisions of the law protect employees regardless of the size of the business. Employers cannot pay workers lower wages or no wage because of their immigration status. They cannot harass or make fun of workers because of their nationality, religious beliefs, or attire, accent, or immigration status. They cannot punish workers for speaking their own language. They cannot threaten workers about calling the police because of their immigration status. And they cannot refuse to hire someone because of their nationality, religious beliefs, attire, or accent. Next slide, please. The New York City Commission on Human Rights protects individuals from discrimination in the area of public accommodations. Anyone who provides goods and services to the general public is considered a public accommodation. It is against city human rights law for a public accommodation to withhold or refuse to provide full and equal enjoyment for those goods or services based on the following protected classes under the law: age, alienage or citizen status, color, disability, gender, gender identity, marital or partnership status, national origin, pregnancy, race, religion, creed, sexual orientation, status as a veteran or active military service members. And examples of public accommodations are stores, banks, medical or dental offices, government agency, hair salons, hospitals, hotels, theaters, restaurants, schools, or taxis. Next slide, please. COVID-19 food assistance. The city has made significant investments to ensure pantries where you can get groceries and community kitchens where you can get warm prepared food are well stocked. While pandemic-related logistical challenges forced some of these places to scale down their work, others are expanding their operation and serving New Yorkers every day. These places serve everyone, whether you're documented or not. You can find the nearest location by visiting the Food Bank New York City website. In addition, the city itself is running hundreds of meal hubs where you can pick up 3 meals for a person each day, and you can pick up meals for your family members and others as well. No ID or registration is required, and the city has made efforts to ensure these meal hubs are available in areas where access to pantries and soup kitchens is limited. You can visit Meal Hub Locator website or call 311, or you may text food to 877-877 to find a location near you. Next slide, please. The city is also delivering meals to individuals who cannot leave home or do not have anyone to bring food and cannot afford private delivery. No documentation is needed. You just have to answer the survey questions, or you can visit the website and fill out the online survey, or call 311 and say get food. Lastly, while this is not a city program, I want to make sure that you are aware of the pandemic EBT. If you have a child who goes to a New York City public school, you can receive $420 for every child in an EBT card that can be used for purchase of food and groceries. You do not have to apply or do anything. The card should be automatically mailed to you. However, if you are worried if the New York State government has the right address for you or wondering why you still have not gotten the card, you can contact the state OTDA, which is in charge of the federal funded program, by calling 833-452-0096 or email otda.sm.eisp.pebt@otda.ny.gov. Next slide, please. And as I mentioned, thank you for coming to Know Your Rights program. If there are any questions, please write them in the chat box below so we can see, or email CAIR-NY or email MCNY, who then can direct your questions to us. I want to thank MCNY again for allowing us to be able to give you guys such a great immigration rights workshop and to help educate you on your rights as an immigrant. I also want to reaffirm that I am not a lawyer, and this presentation was an education guide to help you learn about your rights as immigrant New Yorkers and services that are available to you. It was not meant to serve as legal advice. Thank you all for joining us, and inshallah, have a lovely night.